Welcome to the start of Module 4. Here in Lesson 1, we're going to learn what area is. We're going to explore some ways that you can measure area and hopefully have some hands-on activities in class that will show and give you a good understanding of what area is. So to start, area is a two-dimensional measurement, and it measures how much space something takes up. It's not three-dimensional, so you can't pick it up and hold it, right? Like my phone here is three-dimensional. It goes this way, and this way, three-dimensional, right? Two dimensions is something that's like flat space. That's a word you'll hear me say in class, flat space. So think of something that's drawn on a piece of paper. How much space does that thing that's drawn on the piece of paper take up? And that's what we're measuring, and is how much space does a two-dimensional thing take up? And again, most of ours can obviously be a paper. And so you're thinking about how much space something takes up on that paper. We'll talk about other ways that you can measure area as well. Say if you were planning to install a pool at your house, or if you were trying to measure how much flooring there was in a room or something like that, you can use area to decide that too. So if you think about your, for example, a bathroom and how much like tile you would need to put on a bathroom floor versus how much tile you might need to put in a kitchen, and you might say, you could compare how big that space is based on how many tiles it would take to cover the floor, that two-dimensional space. So that's what area is. And let's dive into a couple of ways that you're going to be exposed to that today in lesson 1. And then we'll move on into some more work here in lesson 2 in a few minutes. I'm going to share, I actually have my screen set up with a second camera here. So you should be able to see. I have some things drawn here, and the first thing I want to note is this one here, the one in black. And what you're going to do in class, or what you're going to see me do in class as well, is you're going to tile over these pre-drawn spaces to see how much space is taken up. So I didn't bring my school tools home, so I stole some of the Legos from the kids' Lego table. And you'll notice that I'm tiling over, I'm covering this space here that's drawn. I have these square units here, right? Just like we might in class. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the area of this is 8 square units. Now we'll talk a lot more about units as we go on, but square units is what you'll most commonly use, either square units, square inches, or square centimeters in this lesson, or this unit rather. And you can see that there are 8 squares that cover this space, right? And so let's see, is that space the same size as this one also drawn in black below it? Well, let's find out. It doesn't look like it. It looks to me like that one's probably bigger, but let's find out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So again, it took 8 square units, or like 8 Lego bricks, square Lego bricks in this case, to cover that space. So the area that these two things take up on the paper, these two rectangles take up on the paper, is identical. It's the same. The space that this long skinny rectangle takes up is the same amount of space on the page that this second rectangle takes up. And we measure that using a unit. Now, I want to mention something that's really important, because when I did this, when I tiled over this, you'll notice that I put them right together. I covered the entire space. I didn't leave any gaps. And I put them touching each other right together, right? That's really important when you're measuring area. You cannot do something like this. You can't be like 1, 2, 3. I think I can only fit 4, right? These aren't touching. There are white spaces everywhere. And that's not how you measure area, because there's all sorts of stuff I didn't measure in there, like that space, that corner, and everything down here, right? Those aren't measured. So you have to be very precise, very careful with your measurement. Make sure that you're covering the entire area and only the area. You You also can't do this, like, oop, I think I can squeeze an extra one in there. Well, no, that last one's entirely outside. That doesn't count, right? Same thing, like when you have flatter tools, you can't be like, oh, look, I did half one there and I did another one there, and I'm overlapping them a little bit. I guess I could snap these together, right? You can't overlap them either. And I'll show you that again when I draw some for you in a few minutes. But I want you to know that when you measure area, and especially if you're using a tiling, like covering it in some way, we'll use squares. Sometimes we even use triangles in this first lesson, and you'll see me do that in class. You cannot overlap them, and there can be no gaps, and you can only cover the exact space that's there. You can't go outside of that space. Those are sort of the 3 rules of tiling to find area. Now, one way that you're going to see this on your homework is that you'll be given shapes, and you might have this drawn in for you already, right? So you might have one of them already drawn in, and often it's like shaded, right? And it says to go ahead and use that same shape to cover the rest. So in this case, I'm going to continue drawing triangles. All the way around to find out that it's 6 square units. Actually, no, I'm sorry. That is in no way 6 square units. Sorry. It's 6 units because they're not square. So the area of that is 6 units. They're certainly not square. 6 triangles, actually. So yeah, as you'll see, the reason I corrected myself there is the language of area is very important when you're measuring. Using the proper units is really important. So it's always important to correct yourself if you make a mistake with those. So we have 6 units there, and you'll notice that there's no gap between any of these. I've only covered the exact space here in my hexagon. I haven't overlapped any of them, and I haven't either gone outside or again left any gaps, right? I just covered the exact space with no overlapping and no gaps. I could do that same thing. I could also measure with triangles down on this bottom one. I could go like this and then flip my triangle over. And again, you'll see me do something like this in class. And I'll likely give you guys each your own individual toolkits to try it with as well. This one might not work out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's my drawing error, not the setup here. There are 8 units here. You'll notice my last 2 are a little too small. It's because I drew these first couple a little too big. But you'll have problems like that too, where this first one and the second one are shaded in. It will say continue the pattern. And you'll have to figure out how many or how many units it takes to cover that, how many shapes it takes to cover that entire area. All right, the last type of problem you're really going to see today is something like this. And there's 2 ways this will be presented to you. First, you might say, are the areas of these 2 things the same? Right, and often you'll be given a grid. We'll do a lot of work with these things that look like arrays or grids, and you'll have to decide: do these 2 shapes take up the same amount of space on the page? Because again, that's what we're measuring. Area is a measure of 2-dimensional space. In this case, the amount of space that's being taken up on the page. And you go, well, this takes up 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 and 4. That's a 16 units fit in there. So 16, this is square units for that one. And then you go over here and you go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. 14 square units. And you'd say in this case, they're not the same, right? My first one had 16 square units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. My second one only had 14 square units, so they're not the same. The first one, the one that's a little taller and fatter, took up a little bit more space on the page than the one that was skinnier and longer. And so sometimes they will be equal and sometimes they won't. but you can either count the boxes inside, or you can do what I did and say that that's like a 4x4 array and do the multiplication. Because this grid works just like an array, where if you multiply 4 times 4, you'll get the space in there. We're going to learn a lot more about that, because that is the formula that you're ultimately going to use for all this stuff, is multiplying two side lengths to find the area inside a square or a rectangle. All right, I think that's it for lesson 1. We, again, just want to know that area is a measure of two-dimensional space. It's the amount of space something takes up, again, a flat space that something takes up. And when we are measuring that by putting something on top of it, putting tiles of some kind on top of it, we need to make sure that we only cover the exact space we're measuring. We also make sure that there are no gaps and that there's no overlap. So again, back to the example of putting flooring down in a house. If you were trying to decide how much flooring you needed in that bathroom, how many square tiles from the store, when you put them down, you wouldn't have these huge gaps between them. You certainly wouldn't overlap them, because then people would trip and it would look really weird. And you wouldn't also measure space out in the hallway in addition to the space in the bathroom if you were just trying to cover the bathroom floor. So you can think about that the same way when you're measuring these. I think of them like a room. I'm only working in this room, so I can only cover this room. I need to cover all the space in here with no gaps, but I certainly can't overlap at the same time. So I need to cover just the exact right amount of space. I know that was a lot of talking and a lot of language. There is a lot of that in this. There is a lot of that in this unit, a lot of language, a lot of talk about different units and things like that. So you'll hear more of that from me. And I'll continue to repeat it, because the more I repeat it and the more that you use that language, the more comfortable you're going to get with it. All right, guys, please let me know if you have any questions. This is just our first lesson, so I understand that, or first lesson on the subject. So I understand that it's going to take a little bit of time to get into the rhythm here and fully understand what we're working with. So we'll keep plugging away together, and again, ask questions if you have them.